building on certain pieces of property. For example, whereby under zoning regulation enabled or written by municipality, you might have been able to subdivide a property into 1 acre lots and build a house on every acre. The Highlands regulation would contemplate something on the order of 1 house for every 10, 20, or 30 acres of property. And so we've seen a series of legal battles and political battles that flow from that decision by the state. And the last chapter hasn't even begun to be written yet. It's going to go on for a long, long time.
Is one of those chapters the compensation to the people who own the land they can't build on?
That is certainly the issue, because there's certainly been a taking away of someone's property rights. And some families have owned properties for multiple generations, for example, that have been farmed. And now farming is a difficult way to make a living at best in this economy and in this state. And those people want to sell that property and develop it. And whereby before this regulatory scheme of the Highlands went into place, the land was worth X. It's now worth X minus a very big number. So there's a lot of strife and struggle and personal hardship that's brought to bear as a result.
Doug, let's talk about all the different people that are involved in land use. The attorney is obviously the legal representative that's in charge of putting it all together and making these applications. But who are the other people that you're going to deal with on land use issues?
Sure. That's I think you've hit on one of my points. Is that the attorney on a land development project or a land use application is really supposed to be the quarterback in the sense of assembling the rest of the team and trying to get the proper players with the proper background and credentials to do the best possible chance to help you win your case. On a typical application now in northern New Jersey, you almost invariably have an engineer. An engineer is someone who specializes in the development of land and dealing with issues like topography, meaning the slope of the property, where storm water flows when it rains, is there flooding, are there those kind of issues. And they also specialize in site design, in other words, parking lots, sidewalks, access points, both from a function of public safety, functionality, the ultimate ease of maintenance, also you're looking for the engineer to help make sure that your project is as good a neighbor as it can be. So you're trying to regulate noise, excess light. You want to control all those things so that your land use is not incompatible with your neighbors. Second hat.
The engineer puts all that down onto a site plan.
He creates a written plan, usually of multiple sheets, that is the basic template that's submitted to either the Planning Board or the Board of Adjustment, as we talked about earlier, as part of the development application process. One of the other key players, of course, is an architect. The site engineer deals with the land and things related to land. The architects deal with structure. So if you wanted to build that restaurant we've talked about again, you're going to need an architect to make sure that your building is safe, complies with fire codes, complies with handicapped access, and things like that. The other person that's of ever-increasing importance is the wetlands expert that we talked about a couple of minutes ago. Invariably, an applicant is going to need to make a submission to NJDEP to see if there's wetlands impacting his property. Having an expert on board that knows how to do that in an efficient way and has got experience dealing with it.
And that's an environmental consultant.
Absolutely. And those experts have a substantial role to play in terms of the shaping of your application, because if you're impacted by wetlands, you have a right to go and make an application to DEP to alter the size of the buffer. So you may be able to put your building in a buffer if you can compensate with an equal amount of land area elsewhere on your property. But all those experts have to really work in hand to get the best possible product and to enhance your chances of success.
Do you ever use a planner?
Absolutely. Planning consultant is someone who's licensed by the state of New Jersey after examination, and they basically offer an opinion on whether or not your application is appropriate in its particular location in a municipality. When you appear before a Board of Adjustment or Planning Board, there's a burden of proof that you as the applicant have to meet, much as you have a burden of proof in a conventional trial. There's also a burden of proof in these cases, and the planner is actually a key player in the sense that his or her sworn testimony and written reports are meant to demonstrate to the decision makers on the board that you're entitled to your particular relief and you've met your burden of proof. So you've got to, now we've named at least 4 people that are involved.
I guess you could have a traffic consultant, right?
Traffic engineer we talked about before, depending on the site plan. Those are usually reserved for either issues where you have either state or county access issues, or the site is of sufficient size or intensity that traffic becomes an issue. Hopefully a homeowner's case never gets involved in a traffic engineer, but as the regulatory scheme gets more and more complex, you need more and more experts.
Okay, let's go back to the typical homeowner.
Sure.
Right? And somebody wants to put an addition on their house. Maybe they want to put another bathroom or push out a wall, make the kitchen larger, or they want to put on a deck. That's your typical everyday type of application. Let's take that person through the process.
Sure.
Okay.
Typically, that person would go to an architect first and say, "Mr. Architect or Mrs. Architect, I want to, make my house bigger." And the architect will say, "Do you have a survey of your property? Show me a map of your property." And one of the first decisions they'll need to make is whether the addition they wish to build will fit within the building envelope or the restraints imposed by the municipality in terms of what you can do on your property. In a residential zone, invariably ordinances have setbacks. In other words, you can't build any closer to the street, closer to your neighbor on either side, or closer to your back line than a certain number. And if you need to encroach into those areas to do your project, you either need to change your project or you need to go to the Board of Adjustment for relief. And so your architect would typically help you quantify what you're trying to do, see if it'll fit within parameters of local ordinance, and then a good architect should have a pretty good handle on whether you've got a substantial degree potential for success if you go to a board. In other words, if your relief is small, you need just a couple feet a distinction, and maybe lots of other houses in the neighborhood already have those characteristics. That's certainly different than, let's say, you want to go within 1 foot of the side yard and no one else in your neighborhood.
Now, could you go with just a contractor? I guess most people probably start out with a contractor, don't they? A local builder. That says,
often, if they want to see an ad and said you're driven by a house with an addition going on, and they say, "Wow, we could do that to our house." The contractor will often have a relationship with an architect that they can create plans, and those plans are then sent to the building department of a particular town. The building department will do an analysis